Ever find yourself, like really sucked into that internet rabbit hole? I mean, we're all on it constantly these days. And it makes you wonder, right? Like, what is all this doing to our brains?
It's a question a lot of us are asking, and today we're going deep on this. We're jumping into Nicholas Carr's book, The Shallows. He really digs into this whole idea, how the internet is changing the way we think.
And it's not just a simple, is the internet good or bad kind of thing.
Not at all. He goes way deeper than that. One of the things he does is he looks back at how other inventions, technologies have shaped our thinking. He calls them, intellectual technologies.
Yeah, intellectual technology.
Yeah.
Basically, these are tools that directly impact our brains, how we process stuff, not just like physical tools.
Right, exactly. Like a hammer lets you build something. But these intellectual technologies, they change how you think about building in the first place.
And he has some really interesting examples. Like, who would think that maps, clocks, even the alphabet have shaped how we think?
It's true, though, if you really think about it. Take clocks, for example. Before clocks, people basically lived with the natural rhythms of the day, right? Sunrise, sunset, that kind of thing.
Totally. It was all about the flow, like, we'll meet when the cows come home.
Exactly. But then the clock comes along, and it's like, boom, time is chopped up into these tiny little bits, minutes, seconds. Suddenly, you're not just living with time, you're racing against it.
It's like we went from cow time to Zoom meeting reminder time. And that's got to do something to your brain, right? To switch like that.
It makes you wonder. And in Carr, he has this great anecdote about Samuel Johnson, the dictionary guy. Johnson's in this amazing library, tons of books, and his friend finds him reading the spines. And the friend's like, what are you doing? But Johnson says knowing where to find information is just as important as the information itself. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It's so true, though. And it's like a perfect example for how we use the internet today. We're all about knowing where to find the information, Googling everything.
We've become expert searchers, but is that changing our brains in ways we don't even realize? I mean, think about it.
It's like instead of navigating a library, we're navigating this whole digital world. Yeah. But are we losing something in the process?
That's what Carr argues, yeah. Like, there's studies on London cab drivers, right? They have to memorize all those streets, and their hippocampus, the part of the brain for spatial memory, it actually grows larger.
Wow, really? Just from knowing the streets?
Yeah. But then you think, what about us using GPS all the time? Could that be like shrinking that part of our brain because we're not using it as much?
Whoa. So if maps could be physically changing our brains, then what about the internet? This constant connection, all this information, what's that doing to us?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
So our brains can adapt. That's kind of wild. But like when we're talking about the internet, what are they even adapting to? What's the big change?
Well, Carr's argument is pretty interesting. He says the internet, like how it's built, it makes us read differently. Less focus, more jumping around.
Oh, tell me about it. I've got like a million tabs open right now. Always something else to click on.
And that's exactly it. He talks about how he used to be like a total bookworm, loved getting lost in the library at Dartmouth, just reading for hours.
Nice.
But then when he started using the internet a lot, he noticed he couldn't concentrate the same way, Even a single page was hard.
Wow.
And it got to the point where he felt this like urge to click on something, even when he wasn't even online.
Oh, I've totally felt that. It's like my brain wants to click on something that isn't even there.
Right. And it's not just him either. There's this whole thing, neuroplasticity, that saying, cells that fire together wire together.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's basically saying the more you do something, the more your brain gets wired for it. So with the internet, all that clicking and scrolling, it's like we're training our brains to be distracted.
Whoa. So it's not just that there are distractions on the internet, it's that we're training our brains to be distracted by the internet. Yikes.
Exactly. And because of that, we're not as good at the stuff that needs deep focus, reading a book, having a real conversation, even just thinking deeply about one thing for a while.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually. Okay, so it's not all good. But, I mean, come on, we're using it right now. Can't be all bad.
Right, of course not. And Carr, he even says that, the internet has a lot of good things about it. But he wants us to see the other side, too. He makes this comparison. It's about our senses, but it makes you think about our brains, too.
Okay, how so?
Well, say someone loses their sight, right? Their other senses, like hearing, touch, smell, they often get stronger.
Oh, right. Like their brain's rewiring to make up for the loss.
Exactly. So Carr's point is, what if the same thing's happening with our brains and the internet? Like, the more we use the internet for these quick hits of info, what if the parts of our brain that do the deep thinking, the really focused stuff, what if those parts are getting weaker because we're not using them as much?
Okay, now that is a little scary, but also, I don't know, makes sense.
Right, it's something to think about.
So we've talked about how the internet might be rewiring our brains for speed, like making us really good at jumping around, getting those quick bits of info. But can we, choose how deep we go? Or is that kind of out of our hands at this point?
That's the big question, right? And I think Carr would say it's a real struggle.
Sure.
The internet itself makes it hard to really, truly engage deeply.
Yeah, it does feel like we're all juggling information all the time, clicking, scrolling, trying to keep up with it all, but never really, absorbing anything.
Right, and our brains can only hold so much at once. It's like we're trying to fill a teacup with a fire hose,
Right.
Way too much coming at us all at once.
Too much. And then we skim. We forget.
Yeah.
It's like our brains are turning into goldfish, just swimming from one shiny thing to the next.
There's some truth to that analogy, yeah. But here's the thing. That ability to filter through all that stuff quickly, to figure out what's important, that's not necessarily a bad thing. In a world with this much information, maybe that's a good skill to have.
It's like our brains are adapting to the internet world, becoming these, information processing machines.
Exactly. We're becoming masters of information triage, and that's pretty valuable in this day and age.
Okay, so maybe the juggler brain has its upsides, but I still wonder, is there a downside? Are we losing something else? That ability to just be with one idea, really think it through deeply, are we trading that for speed?
That's the trade-off Carr wants us to really think about, yeah.
It's tough, though. I mean, look, we're using the internet right now to have this conversation. We can't just, go live in a cave.
Exactly. It's not about ditching the internet entirely. It's about being aware, knowing how it might be changing how we think, and then making choices about how we use it,
Choosing what kind of brain we want to have.
Yes. Because if our brains are being shaped by the tools we use, what kind of tool do we want our brain to be? The fast processor, skimming the surface, or something that can dive deep, handle the complexity? That's something to think about.
Definitely something to think about. And that is a perfect place to wrap up this deep dive into Nicholas Carr's The Shallows. Hopefully this has given you a lot to think about. And maybe, just maybe, it'll make you look at your own internet use a little differently. Until next time.